Okay, imagine this for a second. A brand new civil servant, right? Someone doing essential work for the country. And they could actually be earning less than the minimum wage in their basic monthly pay. It sounds wrong, doesn't it? Almost backwards.
It really does seem counterintuitive when you first hear it. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's exactly why it's blown up into such a major issue in South Korea right now.
Welcome to the deep dive.
Mm.
So today we've got this recent news article about these growing wage demands in South Korea, and we're going to really unpack it for you. Our mission basically is to show you the core problems, some comparisons that are pretty surprising, honestly, and the real people behind these headlines. We want to give you a clear, solid understanding of what's going on, nice and efficiently.
Right. And this isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about the very real difficulties facing people who work in public service in Korea and this growing unhappiness that's really starting to boil over.
Okay, so let's get into the specifics then. What exactly are these civil servant groups asking for, and who's leading the charge here?
Well, the sources show it's mainly groups led by the Korean Federation of Government Employees Unions, KFGEOU they call it. And they've been pretty determined. This is the third year in a row, actually, that they're pushing the Civil Servant Salary Committee for a basic pay hike around 6%. But it's not just, a simple percentage. They've gotten really specific. The details in their demands are quite granular.
Granular, how so? What are the particular things they're zeroing in on?
Okay, so beyond that main 6.6% basic pay ask, they also want a 30,001 monthly boost to the fixed meal allowance and another 35,001 a month for the job allowance, but specifically for grade 6 and below. Plus, they're asking for overtime pay to go up to 60% of the standard basic salary and a 10% bump in their regular service allowance and holiday bonuses. These really specific numbers tell you it's not just a general complaint. It feels like a very targeted strategy. It suggests, maybe some allowances haven't kept up or maybe overtime feels particularly undervalued right now compared to living costs. It really paints a picture.
Right. A workforce that's really looked closely at their pay stubs. And this isn't just talk behind closed doors, is it? The sources mentioned a big protest, a rally, on July 14th, 2025. What was that about?
Absolutely. That was the second executive resolution rally for civil servant wage increase. Big event right in front of the government complex in Seoul. And it wasn't only KFGEOU. It was actually a joint effort with several other big unions. Let me see, the National Public Service Workers Union, the Teachers and Educational Workers Union, the Post Office Union, the Office of Education Unions, even the National Police Workers Council. Seeing them all together like that from different parts of public service really shows you how widespread this feeling is.
Yeah, that sounds like a significant show of unity. I was also struck by something else the source mentioned in an earlier protest, something about 100 young civil servants doing a stepping on iron rice bowls performance. For anyone listening who doesn't know, what's the deal with the iron rice bowl? Why is that significant?
Yeah, that's a really important cultural symbol. The iron rice bowl, it traditionally stood for, secure, stable employment for life, good benefits, steady income. It was something highly sought after, especially in places like Korea. So to symbolically step on it, to reject it, it's a huge statement.
Wow, okay.
It basically says, this thing that used to mean security, it's not worth it anymore. Maybe it's even something we want to get rid of. And the fact that the bigger rally on July 14th happened on the same day the Salary Committee was having its second big meeting, that wasn't an accident. They were definitely trying to maximize the pressure. It's a very conscious effort to shape the narrative.
Okay, let's get back to those headline-grabbing numbers, this wage gap.
Yeah.
Now, just to play devil's advocate for a moment, don't civil servants usually get other benefits, allowances, and things that maybe make that basic salary look less bad?
Yeah.
How much do those add up to? And what's the real core issue here?
That's a fair question, and yeah, the source does get into that. So the 2026 minimum wage, right, it's set at $10,321 an hour, which for a standard work month comes out to roughly 2.15 million won.
Okay.
Now, compare that to the current basic monthly pay for a new grade 9 civil servant. That's around 2 million won.
So yes, the basic pay is actually lower than the minimum wage that's coming.
Exactly. Now, you're right. There are allowances. If you add in things like the job allowance and the meal allowance you mentioned, the average monthly take-home for that entry-level person goes up to about 2.69 million won. Annually, that's like 32.22 million won.
Okay, so with allowances, it's above minimum wage. So what's the argument then? Why do they still feel it's not enough?
Because, the source points out, even with those extras, the overall compensation is still seen as, well, insufficient, that's the word used, especially when you factor in how demanding the work can be. And this feeling, it has a real worrying effect. It's fueling this thing they call the avoidance phenomenon. Basically, fewer and fewer young Koreans even want to apply for these jobs anymore.
Avoidance phenomenon. That sounds serious.
It is. It suggests people just aren't seeing public service as a good career choice anymore.
That's a massive problem brewing for the government, isn't it? If the talent pipeline is drying up, you can almost feel the frustration coming off the page from the union leaders quoted in the article. What were some of the specific things they said?
Oh, the quotes are pretty powerful. Jung Sunjae, who leads the union in Sangdo County, he said something like, every summer, wages are the #1 topic in public service. And he talked about how, with inflation, the real wages for 1.2 million civil servants have actually gone down. He used the phrase survival crisis.
The survival crisis. Wow, that's not just asking for a raise. Yeah.
It paints a picture of real economic hardship, just trying to keep up with basic living costs.
And then Seok Hyun-jung, the head of the main federation, KFGEOU,
Yeah.
he seemed to touch on something deeper, right? This idea of value, of respect.
Exactly. He said civil servants are the ones who sustain the nation, close to the people, but their treatment just isn't keeping pace with the private sector. It raises this fundamental question about fairness and, well, how much society values public service work, and maybe the most telling thing. The source mentions this term civil servants have started using for themselves, kind of self-deprecatingly.
Ongo.
Gongnobi.
Gongnobi. You said that means public slave or public servant, but with a really negative twist. How widespread is that sentiment, do you think? Is it just union leaders being dramatic, or does it reflect something real about morale?
Well, leaders often use strong words, sure, but the article suggests this feeling is pretty pervasive. It mentions another common phrase among civil servants themselves. Leaving public office quickly is a victory.
A victory. To leave your job.
Yeah, when people start saying leaving is winning, that signals a pretty deep level of disillusionment. It's not just about the money anymore. It points to this profound sense of being undervalued, of being frustrated. It kind of eats away at your professional identity. It implies that, the benefits, the security, they just don't balance out the challenges, the workload, and that feeling of maybe not being respected.
So let's try to wrap this up for the listener. What's the big takeaway here? We've sort of uncovered this major tension, right? On one hand, you have civil servants doing absolutely vital work, keeping the country running day to day. But on the other hand, they're facing these really tough economic pressures and feeling increasingly undervalued, to the point they call themselves public slaves.
Right. Which leads to a really important question for you, the listener, to think about. What happens in the long run? What are the consequences for a country's public service when the people doing the work feel like that, when they think leaving is a victory?
Yeah, how does that affect the quality of service?
Yeah.
The morale? Who's going to want to do these essential jobs in the future? It really does make you pause and think about, that fundamental balance between public service and fair compensation in today's world.